and defeats, highs and lows, love, laughter, joy, and happiness. The human experience is also sadness, fear, terror, experiences that make our bones chill, our palms sweat. However, human trafficking is an experience nobody should ever go through. No one should ever have to experience being kidnapped and taken from their loved ones, forced into a life of involuntary servitude, hard labor, or God forbid, sexual slavery. Nobody should have to live in constant fear of strangers or fear that they or their loved ones might be targeted by traffickers. The scary part about this is that at one point or another, we all have been at risk, or may even continue to be at risk, of being preyed upon. The human trafficking industry is one of the most dangerous and widespread industries across the world. It should be no coincidence when I say this. According to a forced migration overview article from USF for Freedom, in 2014, it was estimated that more than 5.5 million children across the world were victims of human trafficking at any given time. I've taken a lot of time to research this and to understand just how dangerous it can be for victims and just how large and widespread the problem is across the world. My family has also been personally affected by human trafficking. I recently heard from my older cousin that when they lived in Sacramento, their friends' daughters were mere hours away from being taken away forever. Taken away by traffickers who saw those two little girls as people to be used, objects of pleasure for perpetrators and their twisted views. Today, we will be diving into what human trafficking is really and how big of a problem it is, how to combat it, and what might continue to happen if we don't continue to fight. What is human trafficking? According to an article from Bustle.com, human trafficking is defined by the Department of Homeland Security as a modern-day form of slavery involving the illegal trade of people for exploitation or commercial gain. But more importantly, it's the most dangerous industry that's probably not talked about enough. Just how bad is it really? Human and sex trafficking does not discriminate against its victims. That same article from Bustle reported that trafficking of women and children recently became the world's fastest growing crime, as reported by the Department of Defense as well in 2018. Sex trafficking is a $90 billion industry. And it's almost never talked about. An article titled Domestic Minor Sex Trafficking in the United States from 2010 describes what we call a culture of tolerance, in which in countries like the US, where we have a lot of wealth, the glamorization of pimping and sexualization is what causes human trafficking to go under the radar. It's all around us, and it's a lot closer than people think. Out of 167 countries ranked in terms of slavery prevalence, the U.S. was ranked at 145th. A 2016 report from the Mayor's Task Force on Human Trafficking in San Francisco stated that of 247 identified trafficking survivors, all 247 of those cases were people under 18 years old. It should also be noted that many cases during that year in San Francisco were not reported. The FBI has identified the Bay Area as one of the biggest hotspots for human trafficking anywhere across the country. And it should also be noted that California is described as the third biggest market for human trafficking in the United States, across any of the states. The National Human Trafficking Hotline reported for California in 2018 that of 760 human trafficking cases reported, 572 of those cases were sex trafficking. This is absolutely horrible, but it should be noted it's not impossible to overcome. It's time we look into what we can do. There are many organizations across the world that combat human trafficking and sex trafficking that people can donate to. These are organizations like UNICEF, Free the Girls, or Free the Slaves, just to name a couple. All of these organizations are dedicated to combating and ultimately ending human and sexual trafficking. Know your resources. The National Human Trafficking Hotline is available 24/7 all year and is available in over 200 different languages to people who call. Over 14,000 calls have been made this year already. What we can also do is be aware and look for the signs ourselves. If you believe someone is a victim of human or sexual trafficking, some of the signs you can look for include poor mental health, like being fearful, anxious, depressed, being very submissive, tense, or nervous and paranoid. There are signs like poor physical health, like malnourishment, poor hygiene, fatigue, and possible signs of substance abuse too. The whole point is that we need to be aware and we need to be observant. Here's a harsh reality of what could happen without further action. Imagine 10 or 20 years down the road, you're a parent, and you decide to take your 5-year-old daughter with you on a trip to the grocery store to get some food. You go inside, and for just one moment, you leave your child unattended so you can grab some food from a different aisle. One moment, you see them. The next moment, you don't. It was just 1 second you turned away. 1 second you left your child to get something. You never heard a scream for help. It was too late already. You desperately call for store security to find your missing daughter. It's too late already. You file for a missing persons report. It's too late already. An Amber Alert is issued. By then, it's far too late. A few hours pass, and there's a realization slowly sinking in that you may never see your daughter again. Here's what you missed, though, when you went to the grocery store. You missed the black car following you into the grocery store. You missed the man in the dark clothes with his features concealed, eyeing your daughter. You missed the quiet footsteps as your daughter was approached. That is just a specific example of what could happen. But the harsh reality is that millions of Americans, millions of people across the world, are put into situations just like this. You thought your daughter was safe with you. Traffickers had other ideas. Human trafficking is an impossibly difficult situation to imagine, but it's not impossible to stop. Here's what we can do. Again, we can donate to organizations. For example, organizations like freetheslaves.net, polarisproject.org, which is a worldwide organization dedicated to the combating of human and sexual trafficking, and unicef.org, which is a worldwide children's organization that, while not specifically focusing on human and sexual trafficking, has many resources that assist victims. If you ever notice something or someone that might be at risk of being trafficked, the National Human Trafficking Hotline, the number you can call, is 1-888-373-7888. Again, it's 24/7. It's toll-free, confidential, and in over 200 languages. We can also, again, be aware of the signs and be observant of our surroundings. Sex trafficking and human trafficking isn't a game, nor should it ever be. We really need to be aware of what's going on around us, because ultimately, it just might hit home closer. It might hit closer to home than all of us think. Thank you.
Daniel, most compelling research you came across in your research?
think one of the most compelling research points I came across was the fact that the sex trafficking or the human trafficking industry rakes in about $90 billion each year currently, and it's been steadily rising since it's become more prevalent. Not to mention the fact that it's the fastest growing crime in the world, the trafficking of women and children. So, and then the reason that I ended up deciding to focus on this topic was because during Thanksgiving, my aunt told me that her son, my older cousin, who lives in the Sacramento area, he's moving to somewhere in Kentucky, and one of the reasons was that he feared for the safety of his daughters after hearing the experience that my cousin's friends had. So that's why I decided to focus on this topic.
And crazy enough, the 101 is actually a Florida for sex trafficking. Because it's a little less, I don't know why, but. Okay, thank you very much, Daniel.
Thank you.
Thank you. You guys, that was pitiful. Okay, we don't have any other speakers here today, which is really unfortunate for them. What I want you to do now is we are going to break up into your groups, into your teams, and I want you to give your teammates feedback. Be very thoughtful and intentional about what they were arguing for, and if you were compelled to make a change in your own life, what would you do differently as a result of the information that they presented to you? Think about structure, content,